were they playing to win or were they playing not to lose? And I think in some ways we're playing not to lose.
美国仍是生物医学第一，但这位访沪归来的行业负责人却警告，如果只想着限制中国，美国是在避免失败，而不是争取胜利。
Well, let's stay in Shanghai. All right, you get there. What stood out to you? What surprised you? What are some key takeaways for those of us who have never been? What was it like?
So the first thing is that you notice that is amazing is when you're on your approach to Shanghai airport. And fortunately, it was a clear day, and you look out at the harbor there are hundreds of cargo ships. I'd never seen so many cargo ships. They have a couple hundred cargo ships going in and out of that Shanghai port every single day. And you compare that to a busy port like Long Beach or Seattle has just a handful that go in and out. So that was the first thing that I noticed, like, oh my gosh, there's so many cargo ships there. And if you think about it, we've been sending manufacturing to China for 50 some years. And this is all the result of that. And the top 10 ports for manufacturing and just tonnage of cargo, they're all in Asia. And so it shouldn't be a surprise because we kind of created that. We developed it here and there. So that was the first thing that I noticed was just landing in Shanghai and seeing the incredible industrialization that had occurred there. And then as you're driving into Shanghai from the airport, you can't but notice that there's buildings all along the way that have all the major pharma logos on them prominently displayed, whether they're manufacturing operations, whether they're research and development locations.
So it's like coming in from SFO or driving. It's the same thing. Okay.
I could be driving through Oyster Point in South San Francisco, and you're seeing the same thing. There is a huge presence by pharma there. And, it's not really a surprise because we've known for the last 5 to 10 years that there's this $350 billion patent cliff that pharma is now is going to be dealing with. And so they're looking all over for, like, how are we going to replace these drugs that are going off patent? And this is one of the solutions. Mm-hmm. They're doing deals everywhere. And it just turns out that the Chinese, that's kind of simultaneous with this patent cliff, the Chinese biotech sector has grown to the point where it is ready to do deals. And that's been a combination of things that have happened in China, including the 5-year plans, which specify that biotech is going to be a major investment area and growth area for the economy. But it also has a lot to do with how they manage that biotech economy in China. If you look at just the sheer number of companies that are there, I'll take a moment and just say that we went to a kind of bizarre market called the AP market, and it's a couple hundred stalls. They had within those stalls, they only sell like 12 things. So you're either buying luggage or you're buying electronics or you're buying some clothing or there's very few things. So they have optometrists there, and so in these couple hundred, you basically have 15 or 20 stalls that are doing exactly the same thing. They're selling the exact same electronics. They're selling the exact same clothing. And so how do these people compete? I mean, they have something in China in the 5-year plan called involution. And involution is all about supporting all of these different companies and just letting them battle it out. And the winner takes all. So you've got these stalls at the AP market. They're all selling the same stuff. And it's like, who can be better at selling this exact same equipment or clothing or luggage? And so the best rise to the top, the ones who figured out how to do it. And the same is true in biotechnology there, the government is very generous in supporting all of these biotech companies. And at one point we asked, how many biotech companies are there in China? And the estimates we got were anywhere from 6,000 to 10,382, which was an official number given to us by one agency. So we really don't really know, but how do you support that many companies? Well, they basically, through involution, they support all of them and they let them battle it out. And that is something that is difficult to compete with. It's part of who China is, and it's part of why they've risen so quickly.
Where entrepreneurship comes from culturally. How was your reception in Shanghai, and were you welcomed? Do people see this as a two-way partnership?
They did. We were very fortunate. We had bankers helping us set up meetings. We had law firms that were based in Shanghai helping us set up meetings, and then we had a political handler that works with a lot of Congress folks that had been there many times and could connect us with government-oriented organizations that were supporting the biotech industry. And again, we were trying to learn as much as we could. And so we met with a kind of a trade organization called Sabita that supports a lot of biotechs, and we got to meet with all of those biotechs and kind of understand what their needs are and how they would want to engage with companies in California or partners in California. We also met with a similar group of investors, and it was interesting to meet with the investors because they are solely focused on investing in Chinese companies at this point. We were trying to see if there was any interest in investing in US-based companies, and there just really isn't at this moment because they just see it as a difficult time to be trying to get into the United States and invest. But super friendly and very much selling China at all times. Everybody there is fully in line with the Chinese government saying, we want to be a player in biotechnology. We're going to invest. We're going to invest in the entire supply chain. And we want to be one of the best in the world at this. And we want people to know that we're here and that we're open for business.
One of the conversations around China is what is missing in that value chain, and sort of the last link I think many folks would agree with is a truly global, multinational, out of China that is going to do clinical trials all around the world. They don't seem to have cracked their own version of Pfizer or Merck or what have you. Did you pick up on that? Is that something they're working toward? Is that something they want? Do they want B1 to be a global player? Or do they seem content with, we've mastered the biotech side of it, you all have those multinationals and they seem to be coming in and moving assets forward? Did you pick up on that missing link? Because it's something we talk about a lot here.
There's definitely a desire to do that. If you think about what the Chinese are really good at, it's developing processes for manufacturing and processes for driving science forward, which is why they're so good. Why they're such a good partner at iterative processes. Let's produce a bispecific in 30 different flavors until we find the one that really works. And they're going to be really great at doing that. There is a desire to take that next step and be a global player in the space where they're looking at selling their drugs into the US-based market, which is the largest market in the world. 50% of the revenue on drugs in the worldwide comes out of the United States. So if you're a player like a Hengrui in China, you're going to want to bring drugs to the US. They're at that point right now where they're looking at what they're really good at, which is developing drugs and manufacturing them and working in partnership. And that's where you're seeing all the deals happen right now, is that stage. But there's definitely an appetite to want to get to the point where they're selling their drugs to the United States. And keep in mind, the United States is 300 million people. their middle class in China is 300 million people. So they've got just as big a market in China that they can go after, but they don't have the same pricing. It's going to be like anybody else that's trying to sell in Europe versus US versus elsewhere. You're going to have different pricing based on what the local economy is going to allow. But there's an appetite to do that. The other thing that's interesting is that they haven't, as you move up the food chain, you tend to want to give up the stuff that's behind you. So the US is really good at this. Like, we've gotten to the point like, hey, we're developing this, let's manufacture it somewhere else. The Chinese don't want to give up any of it. They want to continue manufacturing the tchotchkes that are sitting in our garage and everything else, in addition to moving up the food chain and manufacturing iPhones and drugs, at the highest level.
That is, I need to sit with that for a moment, because that is interesting. We would just say, okay, as you naturally work on harder, more advanced stuff, you let the easy stuff go, and they want to do it all, and which is probably a good segue. I mean, they clearly have ambitions that are driven by government, which has led to this moment in U.S. policy of what do we do that we are no longer necessarily going to always lead the world in new drug development. And so one of the hot topics right now is the concept of adding biotech to this restrictive, what we call the COINS Act list. And should we limit the ability of U.S. companies or U.S. investors to engage in China? Well-intentioned or not, how do you what you saw in China, the appetite, the panel you were on 2 years ago where everyone's saying, I'm doing stuff in China. How do you reconcile that? And do you think what policies do you think we need to best navigate the current moment we're in?
Yeah, I think that, I just got off NSCEB, Emerging Biotech Commission meeting. And I got to thinking about generally what they're doing is two things. They've got a lot going on, and it is very well intentioned. I think they've done amazing work, and it basically falls into two categories, though. One is kind of protectionist measures against China, and then the second is investment in the U.S. bioliteracy, workforce development, NIH, SBIR funding. And the second one, I think we can all get on board with, but that's been the more troubling piece for them, is trying to get more investment. The first part, I think they've had some success. And whether you agree with Biosecure or not, the Congress and the current administration believes that's the right way to go right now to try to improve things for us as an economy, and to compete from the perspective of biotech in this particular sector. And I think that I think it's well-intentioned, but I think that in some cases it goes a little too far. And to create blacklists for companies is difficult because there's such a big gray area there. And I think that I haven't seen any evidence specific to companies that are acting poorly or working with the Chinese government specifically. But I know that we need to be careful about this and thoughtful as we go into different deals that we're doing. And I think that's the most important thing, is that we have a group, whether it's CFIUS with investments coming into the US or whether it's investments going out, we need to be very thoughtful and do our diligence on each one of those deals and understand, why is this being done? What's happening? What's the best way to move forward? Does this deal really good for the company and for the country? And just be thoughtful about how we're doing that as part of looking at that.
Is one of your takeaways from China that they're a net positive to the ecosystem and your membership? Or could you imagine a world, can you imagine a world where China is taken out of your membership's drug development plans?
I mean, I always see it as I hate to use a bunch of sports analogies, but I'm getting ready to. We're in the middle of the World Cup right now, and we want the U.S. to win. We want to compete. And at the same time, all of these countries are coming together to promote the game of soccer throughout the world. And that's the beauty of the beautiful game, is that everybody can get behind a fantastic performance on the pitch. But we also want to win. And I see this as similar in that we want to compete, we want to win, and at the same time we want to work together and we want to cooperate to do great things for the human condition that can't be done unless we do work together. No, I think that that's an important aspect of what I see as this kind of tightrope that we're walking in terms of wanting to be supportive of biomedical research worldwide, focus on problems together, and competing with each other. I like it, and where it's going is that China is a free agent. They're willing to work with everybody. They're very open. That attitude is the attitude of someone who's trying to be the best. The attitude of someone who's currently leading that's a different attitude sometimes, and sometimes it's not the right attitude. And I'll jump into the next sports analogy because I think this is fitting based on what just happened. And that was, are you a Knicks fan?
I think we all have to be Knicks fans. Otherwise, people will yell at you on the street. So yes, for the purposes of this podcast,
at this moment,
I'm a Knicks fan.
At this moment, we're all Knicks fans. And when you watch that series, you realize that the Spurs led virtually every single game at some point, and in some cases by huge amounts, and yet they lost. And so they got to that second half and they got to the fourth quarter, and you have to ask yourself, what were they thinking? The U.S. is number one in biomedical research in the world right now, and China is really working hard to catch up. They are playing to win, and if you put in protectionist measures and you are like coins and like biosecure, and you're saying, we're going to be conservative about this, we're going to try to slow other people down, we're no longer playing to win. We're playing to not lose.
That's the analogy. That is terrific. Let's be the Knicks. Let's not be the Spurs.
Let's be the Knicks. And if you think about it, the way to play to win is to fund NIH, catalyze innovation, fund SBR and STTR, really apply the money that we need to apply here to make things happen. And when we talk about moonshots and we say, hey, this is a good thing to do, a moonshot. Well, apply moonshot to the whole industry. Advanced manufacturing technologies, early phase first in human trials, fixing the regulatory system. Congressman Auchincloss, we're giving him a lot of support on this FDA reform that he has for early phase clinical trials. It's a very good plan. We spent a lot of time with them talking about it, and I think it's the right thing to do. But it's also about playing to win, and I think that's got to be the best approach.
Tim Scott 在上海先看到的是规模，港口、制造、研发中心和跨国药企集中在同一座城市。随后改变他判断的是，中国生物医药已经从承接生产和低成本服务走到可以提供候选药物、研发流程和全球合作项目的位置。这种变化并非某一家企业突然成功，长期产业投入带动地方平台、医院、投资机构、制造企业和大量初创公司同时进入。企业多了会有重复、价格竞争和淘汰，绝非每家公司都能活下来。与此同时，人才、供应商和客户也会聚集，项目可以更快比较，流程可以持续改进。Scott 用内卷解释这种竞争，多少带有旅行者的简化。中国生物医药的能力还来自临床资源、工程人才、制造质量、监管改革、资本和市场的共同积累。竞争负责筛选，完整的产业生态才能把留下来的企业推向更高水平。中国企业也不满足于永远做跨国药企的供应商， 他们正从合作开发、授权和生产向全球临床试验与主要药品市场延伸，同时保留工艺开发和制造环节。早期研究、生产与商业合作留在同一条产业链中，创新便能不断得到制造现场的反馈。美国依然拥有世界级大学、原创科学、成熟资本市场和大型药企。原片没有说中国已经取代美国，问题在于美国准备怎样保持领先。国家安全审查有其必要，敏感数据和投资也应逐笔判断，笼统切断合作却不会让中国已经形成的能力消失。如果美国企业不再使用中国的项目、试验和制造资源，欧洲、日本及其他市场仍可能继续合作。美国企业失去的也许不只是一个竞争对手，还包括补充候选项目、降低研发成本和加快流程的机会。精准审查与全面隔离是两种政策选择，不能混为一谈。中国在追赶阶段主动展示能力，承接项目，进入海外市场，并借助合作积累监管经验。这里当然有自身利益，但也说明开放可以成为提升产业能力的一部分。可靠的领先必须靠持续投资基础研究、人才、先进制造和监管效率。只谈限制，美国就可能从创造技术和规则的领先者变成盯着追赶者速度的守成者。产业竞争最终考验的是谁能让科学、流程、制造、资本和市场继续向前运动。中国生物医药仍面对重复投资、企业淘汰、全球监管和商业化等考验，领先位置远未确定，但它已不再只是廉价制造的附属环节。外界需要重新理解的是，一个能够提供科学项目、流程能力和全球合作选择的新参与者已经形成。有效的回应应是更好的创新和更精准的规则，而非否认这一变化。